The diplomatic vessel, Eternal Horizon, moved through the darkness of space like a silver needle threading through black fabric. Commander Jiwoo stood on the bridge watching the stars pass by through the viewport. She had made this journey 17 times before. Each time she carried Earth's hope for continued peace with the Galactic Council. Each time she returned home successful. Today would be her 18th mission to Meridian Point, the neutral station where humans and aliens met to discuss trade, borders, and the delicate balance of galactic politics. Jiwoo was 42 years old and had spent 20 years in Earth's diplomatic service. Her uniform was crisp and clean, decorated with ribbons that told the story of her career. She had 3 children waiting for her back on Earth. The oldest, Junwoo, was 19 and studying law. The twins, Minna and Hana, were 15 and never stopped asking when their mother would come home. She carried their photos in her pocket right next to her heart. In 7 days, she would see them again. That was the plan. Captain Hyun entered the bridge and stood beside her. He was 38, her second in command, and had served with her for 6 years. They had become friends during that time, the kind of friendship built through shared experiences and mutual trust. He carried a datapad with the latest information about their mission. The Vrelian delegation is already at the station, Hyun said quietly. Ambassador Daewon sent word that tensions are higher than usual. The mining rights dispute in the Outer Rim has them agitated. Jiwoo nodded. The Vrelian sovereignty had been humanity's enemy 700 years ago. That war had been terrible, lasting decades and costing billions of lives on both sides. It ended with the Treaty of Broken Stars, a document that established peace, created trade agreements, and set up strict rules for how humans and aliens would interact. For 7 centuries, the treaty had held. Both species had followed the rules, kept the peace, and slowly learned to coexist. We've handled difficult negotiations before, Jiwoo said. The treaty is strong. We'll find a solution. The Eternal Horizon docked at Meridian Point 3 hours later. The station was enormous, a wheel of metal and glass spinning slowly in space. It belonged to no single species, but was maintained by the Galactic Council as neutral ground. Here, conflicts were resolved with words instead of weapons. At least that was how it was supposed to work. Ambassador Daewon met them at the airlock. He was 67 years old and had spent his entire career working for peace. His hair was white, his face lined with age, but his eyes were still sharp. He had been present when the Treaty of Broken Stars was signed, a young assistant carrying documents for his superiors. Now he was Earth's senior diplomat, the man who understood the treaty better than anyone alive. Commander Jiwoo, he greeted her with a slight bow. Thank you for coming. The Vrelians are difficult today. They believe the mining territories should be theirs by right of ancient claim. We have documentation proving human colonies were there first, but they refuse to accept our evidence. Then we'll present the evidence again, Jiwoo said calmly, and we'll keep presenting it until they understand. That's what diplomacy is. The negotiation room was large and circular with a table at the center. The Vrelians were already seated when the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, tall beings with scaled skin and golden eyes. Their leader, High Minister Voth, was old and experienced, but next to him sat a younger officer, a junior diplomat named Krell who kept shifting in his seat like he wanted to be anywhere else. The negotiations began. Both sides presented their arguments. Jiwoo spoke in careful, measured tones, explaining Earth's position with patience and clarity. She had done this so many times before. She knew how to find common ground, how to offer compromises that satisfied both parties. This was her gift, her talent. She was a peacemaker. 4 hours passed. Progress was slow but steady. High Minister Voth began to soften, recognizing that some of Earth's claims had merit. A compromise was forming, a solution where both species would share access to the disputed territories. Jiwoo allowed herself a small moment of hope. Another successful mission. Another day of peace preserved. Then everything went wrong. During a brief recess, Jiwoo stood and stretched, making a casual gesture with her hand as she turned toward Captain Hyun. It was a simple human gesture, meaningless, just the natural movement of someone who had been sitting too long. But the young Vrelian officer, Krell, saw it differently. In Vrelian culture, that particular hand movement was an insult, a challenge. Krell's eyes widened. His body tensed. Insult. He shouted in his own language, then in human speech. The human mocks us. No, High Minister Voth said quickly. Calm yourself. It was not intended, but Krell was young and angry and full of the pride that came from serving a powerful empire. His hand moved to his sidearm, the small energy weapon that diplomatic escorts were allowed to carry for protection. The weapon was meant to defend against pirates or terrorists, never to be used in a negotiation room. Never to be used against a diplomat under the protection of the treaty. Krell fired. The energy bolt crossed the room in a fraction of a second. It struck Commander Jiwoo in the chest, burning through her uniform and her flesh and her heart. She fell without a sound, her body hitting the floor with a terrible finality, the photos of her children scattered from her pocket. 3 faces smiling up from the cold metal floor. Captain Hyun moved instantly, drawing his own weapon and positioning himself between the Vrelians and Ambassador Daewon. The room exploded into chaos. Alarms sounded. Security forces rushed in from both sides, humans and aliens shouting at each other. High Minister Voth was yelling at Krell, his voice full of horror and rage. But it was too late. Commander Jiwoo was dead. Captain Hyun helped Ambassador Daewon retreat to their ship along with the rest of the human delegation. Medical teams tried to revive Jiwoo, but there was nothing they could do. The energy weapon had destroyed her heart completely. She died on a neutral station during a diplomatic mission, under the supposed protection of a 700-year-old treaty. News of her death reached Earth within 6 hours. It spread through human space like wildfire. People gathered in public squares watching news broadcasts in stunned silence. They saw Commander Jiwoo's service record, learned about her children, read her final report about hoping to find peace. They watched footage of her body being carried off Meridian Point in a flag-draped casket. The Vrelian sovereignty issued an official response within 24 hours. They expressed regret for the unfortunate incident and announced that Officer Krell would be exiled to a remote colony. They offered monetary compensation to Earth and to Jiwoo's family, 10 million credits for a life, 30 pieces of silver for betraying peace. Humanity's response was silence. Admiral Sunmi, commander of Earth's Third Fleet, received orders to seal all borders. Human ships withdrew from alien space. Human merchants closed their shops on alien worlds. Human ambassadors packed their belongings and came home. Earth's communication channels went dark, no longer answering calls from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Daewon requested one final session before the Council. He stood before representatives from dozens of species and spoke in a voice that trembled with barely contained emotion. He spoke of the treaty, of 700 years of peace, of the rules and protocols that were supposed to keep everyone safe. He spoke of Jiwoo, of her dedication to peace, of her children who would never see their mother again. Then he invoked Article 47 of the Treaty of Broken Stars, the clause that allowed withdrawal if treaty protections failed. Earth was leaving the Galactic Council. The 700-year peace was over. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity looked like when it was angry. 700 years was a long time. Long enough for memories to fade and histories to become stories. The species of the Galactic Council remembered humans as careful diplomats, cautious merchants, and nervous neighbors who always followed the rules. They had forgotten the humans who fought the First War, the ones who had battled a dozen alien species simultaneously and refused to surrender even when their worlds burned. But humanity had not forgotten. In a secure facility beneath the ice of Europa, General Boram stood before a massive holographic display. She was 49 years old and had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now that war was here and she was ready. The display showed Earth's military assets, hundreds of installations that the galaxy knew nothing about. Shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, weapons factories on remote moons, training centers on colony worlds. For 700 years, humanity had prepared for peace, but they had never stopped preparing for war. Activate all reserves, Boram said quietly. Begin full mobilization. I want every ship, every weapon, every soldier ready within 30 days. Her subordinates moved quickly, sending orders across human space. Within hours, the preparation began. Miners on distant asteroids put down their tools and picked up rifles. Merchant ships received retrofit orders. Their cargo holds converted to carry missiles instead of trade goods. Young men and women reported to recruitment centers, volunteering by the millions. The phrase "Remember Jiwoo" appeared everywhere, painted on walls, displayed on screens, whispered in conversations. A woman who had dedicated her life to peace had been murdered during a diplomatic mission, and humanity would not let that stand. On Mars, Dr. Tae Yang worked in his laboratory, a place few people knew existed. He was 51 years old and led something called the Prometheus Project. For decades, he and his team had studied alien technology, learned its secrets, and developed weapons that could counter it. The galaxy thought humanity was technologically behind, still using primitive fusion drives and simple energy weapons. They were wrong. Humanity had been learning, adapting, and improving in secret. The quantum disruption cannons are ready, Taeyang told General Boram during a secure communication. The adaptive swarm missiles are in production. The regenerating armor passed all tests. When our ships meet theirs, they're going to be very surprised. Good, Boram replied. Make them regret ever underestimating us. The Vrelian sovereignty watched humanity's withdrawal with satisfaction at first. They saw it as weakness, as humans running away from confrontation. The Galactic Council tried to mediate, sending messages to Earth requesting dialogue. Those messages went unanswered. Earth's communication channels remained dark, silent, giving no indication of what was happening behind closed doors. Then the Vrelians made a mistake. Their High Council, emboldened by what they saw as human cowardice, issued a statement demanding that Earth accept the Council's arbitration or face consequences. They dispatched their Fifth Fleet to the human border as a show of force. 300 warships, the largest fleet the Vrelians had assembled in centuries. It was meant to intimidate humanity into submission. They encountered a single human ship. The Righteous Fury was a dreadnought, a massive warship that hung in space at the border of human territory. It was alone, one ship facing 300. Captain Hyun commanded it. After Jiwoo's death, he had requested this post specifically. He wanted to be the first to face the Vrelians in combat. He wanted to honor his fallen commander by showing the galaxy what happened when you killed a human under a flag of peace. The Vrelian fleet commander sent a message. Human vessel, you are outnumbered 300 to 1. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply. Captain Hyun sat in his command chair, studying the tactical display. His crew was silent, waiting for his orders. These men and women had trained for this moment. They knew their ship, knew its weapons, knew what it could do. The galaxy was about to learn something it had forgotten. Hyun activated the communication channel. Vrelian fleet, this is Captain Hyun of the Righteous Fury. You killed Commander Jiwoo during a peace talk. You offered us money for her life. Now you will learn what humans offer in return. He closed the channel and gave the order. All weapons fire at will. The Battle of the Threshold lasted 17 minutes. The Righteous Fury moved like nothing the Vrelians had ever seen, its engines pushing it through space with impossible speed and agility. Its quantum disruption cannons tore through Vrelian shields as if they were paper. Its swarm missiles adapted to every defensive measure, finding weak points and exploiting them with ruthless efficiency. Its armor absorbed hits and repaired itself, metal flowing like liquid to seal breaches. But the true terror was not the technology. It was the tactics. Human commanders had studied every battle of the First War. They had learned from their victories and their defeats. They had developed new strategies, new approaches, new ways of fighting that the galaxy had never encountered. The Righteous Fury did not fight to capture territory or take prisoners. It fought to destroy, completely and utterly. Vrelian ships exploded in silent bursts of light. Their formation broke apart as panic spread through their ranks. Captains who had never faced real combat before suddenly found themselves fighting for their lives against an enemy that showed no mercy. Some tried to run. The Righteous Fury hunted them down. Some tried to surrender. Their surrender signals were ignored. When the battle ended, 73 Vrelian ships were destroyed. The rest were crippled, their engines dead, their weapons offline, their crews trapped in floating coffins. The Righteous Fury had sustained moderate damage, nothing its repair systems could not fix within hours. Captain Hyun broadcast one final message to the survivors. This is the first debt paid. We will collect until the account is settled. Tell your leaders that humanity is coming. The footage of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak watched in horror as a single human ship destroyed a fleet. Military analysts studied the tactics, trying to understand how it was possible. Historians pulled up old records from the First War. records that had been gathering dust for centuries, and suddenly those old warnings made sense. Humanity had not been defeated in the First War. The war had ended because both sides were exhausted, because the cost had become too high for everyone involved. But humanity had been fighting a dozen species at the same time, spreading their forces thin across hundreds of star systems. Now they were unified, focused, directed at a single target, and they had 700 years of advancement behind them. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representative after representative stood to speak, their voices full of fear and uncertainty. The Vrelian ambassador demanded intervention, claimed humanity was being unreasonable and disproportionate. Other species were less sure. Some remembered their own conflicts with the Vrelians, remembered how the sovereignty had treated smaller species with contempt. Few suggested that perhaps the Vrelians had brought this upon themselves. The council issued a statement calling for calm and restraint. It accomplished nothing. Humanity was not interested in statements. They were not interested in mediation or arbitration. They had spent 700 years following the rules, trusting the system, believing that the treaty would protect them. Commander Jiwoo had died because the system failed. Now humanity would create their own justice. On Earth, Minister Hyo-jin addressed the public for the first time since the mobilization began. She was 58 years old and held a position that had not been filled in 400 years, Minister of War. Her appointment had been confirmed unanimously by Earth's government. She stood before cameras, her expression calm but her eyes hard as steel. "We did not want this war," she said. "We spent 7 centuries building peace, following treaties, respecting protocols. We sent our best people to negotiate with aliens who saw us as weak. Commander Jiwoo was murdered during a diplomatic mission, and the Vrelian response was to offer us money and exile the killer to a comfortable colony. They thought we would accept this. They were wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Humanity will not seek conquest or empire. We will dismantle the Vrelian sovereignty's ability to wage war. We will destroy their economy. We will leave them defenseless. And we will do this so that no species ever again thinks it is acceptable to kill a human under a flag of peace. This is not revenge. This is education." The message was clear. Humanity was not fighting to win territory. They were fighting to teach a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. The war changed everything. Species that had spent centuries believing in the stability of the Galactic Council suddenly realized how fragile that stability was. The Vrelian sovereignty, once proud and confident, found itself fighting for survival against an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move, counter every strategy, and win every battle with terrifying efficiency. Commander Sora led Ghost Squadron, an elite unit that specialized in operations deep behind enemy lines. She was 34 years old and had been training for missions like this since she was 20. Her squadron consisted of 12 ships, small and fast, equipped with stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to Vrelian sensors. They did not fight large battles. They struck at critical targets, the kind that crippled entire fleets or disrupted supply chains. Their first mission was the Naval Academy at Krell Prime. The Vrelian sovereignty trained all its officers there, a massive complex on the surface of an ocean world. Thousands of future commanders studied tactics, learned ship operations, and prepared to lead fleets. It was heavily defended, surrounded by orbital platforms and surface-to-space weapons. The Vrelians believed it was untouchable. Ghost Squadron approached Krell Prime using a route through an asteroid field that Vrelian charts marked as impassable. Sora's ships were small enough and agile enough to weave through the rocks, their stealth systems hiding them from detection. They emerged on the far side of the planet, where defenses were lighter, and launched their attack at dawn when visibility was poor. The quantum disruption missiles struck with precision. Buildings collapsed in controlled demolitions. Training simulators exploded. Dormitories where future officers slept were reduced to rubble. In 15 minutes, Ghost Squadron destroyed a facility that had taken the Vrelians 200 years to build. Then they vanished back into space before the defense fleet could respond. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe. Nothing was untouchable. Humanity could reach any target they chose. Admiral Kyung-soo commanded Earth's first fleet, 200 ships that represented the core of human military power. He was 61 years old and had served his entire career during peacetime. But he had trained for war constantly. His teachers had been veterans of the First War, Old men and women who taught him that war was not about glory or honor. It was about winning, about destroying your enemy so completely that they could never threaten you again. The First Fleet ambushed the Vrelian Second and Fourth Fleets at the Calith Nebula. The Vrelians had been moving to reinforce their border defenses, 600 ships traveling together for protection. They thought their numbers would keep them safe. They were wrong. Admiral Kyung-Soo had placed his ships throughout the nebula, using the dense gas clouds to hide their positions. When the Vrelian fleets entered, they found themselves surrounded. Human ships emerged from the clouds like predators, attacking from every direction simultaneously. The Vrelians tried to form a defensive formation, but the nebula interfered with their communications and sensors. They were fighting blind while humanity saw everything clearly. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Vrelian Second Fleet was completely destroyed. The Fourth Fleet lost 3/4 of its ships and retreated in disarray. Admiral Kyung-Soo reported minimal losses, 8 ships damaged, none destroyed. He sent the footage of the battle to every Vrelian outpost within range, making sure they understood what was coming for them. Dr. Taeyang worked from a research station orbiting Saturn, coordinating the deployment of new weapon systems. His latest creation was a nanotech virus, microscopic machines that could infiltrate Vrelian shipyards and shut them down from the inside. The virus was invisible, undetectable, and irreversible. Once it infected a shipyard's computer systems, it would take years to purge. Technician Yu Jin, a 29-year-old systems expert, helped deliver the virus. She piloted a small cargo ship disguised as a merchant vessel, requesting docking permission at 3 major Vrelian shipyards under the pretense of selling human trade goods. The Vrelians, desperate for any kind of normal commerce during the war, allowed her to dock. Yujin released the virus through the station's ventilation systems, hidden in what appeared to be harmless atmospheric processing units. Within weeks, all 3 shipyards went offline. Construction stopped. Ships being repaired were left incomplete. The Vrelians tried to restart their systems, but the virus adapted faster than they could counter it. Years of ship construction were lost. The sovereignty's ability to replace destroyed vessels evaporated. Colonel Dong Jun led ground forces in capturing Vrelian listening posts along the border. These installations monitored human ship movements and provided early warning of attacks. Dong Jun was 45 years old and had studied Vrelian military doctrine extensively. He knew their procedures, their communication protocols, their standard responses to threats. His forces used those weaknesses perfectly. They captured listening posts intact, keeping the equipment functional but feeding false information back to Vrelian command. Enemy fleets received reports of human ship movements that were completely fabricated. They positioned themselves to intercept fleets that did not exist, while real human forces struck elsewhere. The Vrelians were fighting shadows, wasting resources, chasing ghosts while their real enemies destroyed critical targets. The campaign lasted 6 months. In that time, humanity systematically dismantled the Vrelian sovereignty's military capability. They destroyed fleet bases, crippled logistics networks, eliminated officer training programs, and captured or destroyed resource production facilities. They did not invade Vrelian worlds or target civilian populations. This was not a war of conquest or genocide. It was surgical, precise, focused on a single goal, making sure the Vrelians could never threaten anyone again. The galaxy watched in fascination and horror. Military analysts realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity was not fighting like any species they had seen before. They combined precision strikes with overwhelming force, advanced technology with brilliant tactics, and careful planning with ruthless execution. They were patient, methodical, and absolutely merciless to military targets. Some species quietly celebrated. The Vrelian sovereignty had been bullies for centuries, treating smaller species with contempt and taking what they wanted through intimidation. Now they were receiving a lesson in humility from a species they had dismissed as weak. Other species worried they might be next. A few approached Earth with proposals for new treaties, better terms, guarantees of respect for human life and rights. Humanity ignored them all. There was only one conversation that mattered. The siege of Vrella Prime began 6 months after the war started. Admiral Sunmi, who had sealed Earth's borders at the beginning of the conflict, now commanded the blockade force. 3 fleets, 2,000 ships, surrounded the Vrellian homeworld in a formation that was both beautiful and terrifying. They did not fire on the planet. They simply waited, preventing anything from entering or leaving. Lieutenant Jae-hee, a 26-year-old pilot flying patrol around the blockade, found the scene almost surreal. Vrellian defense stations floated in orbit, fully armed and operational, but they did not fire. They had seen what happened to every Vrellian force that engaged humanity. They knew that if they attacked, they would die, and the planet below them would still be blockaded. So they waited, trapped in their own defenses, watching human ships patrol with mechanical precision. On the planet's surface, the Vrellian government struggled to maintain order. Their economy had collapsed. Ships that brought food and supplies from colony worlds could not penetrate the blockade. Factories that produced consumer goods sat idle because raw materials were not arriving. People who had lived comfortable lives suddenly faced shortages and rationing. The proud empire that had intimidated smaller species for centuries now found itself helpless, surrounded by an enemy that would not negotiate. Admiral Sunmi broadcast a message to the planet, one that was translated into Vrellian and played on every communication channel. You took one life in a moment of carelessness. We have spent 6 months teaching you the value of that life. We can stay here for 6 years, 6 decades, or 6 centuries. Your choice is simple: justice or extinction. The message was not delivered with anger or hatred. Sunmi's voice was calm, almost gentle, which made it more terrifying. This was not an emotional response. This was policy, carefully considered and ruthlessly executed. Humanity had decided what they wanted, and they would not stop until they got it. The Galactic Council tried again to intervene. They sent diplomatic missions to Earth, requesting negotiations. They offered to mediate between humanity and the Vrellians. They proposed new treaties, better enforcement mechanisms, formal apologies. Every proposal was rejected. Earth's response was always the same: there is nothing to negotiate. Commander Jiwoo was murdered. The Vrellians will face justice. When justice is delivered, the war will end. Inside Vrella Prime's government chambers, desperate debates raged. Some officials argued for continued resistance, claiming that giving in to human demands would destroy their honor. Others pointed out that their military was already destroyed. Their economy was collapsing and their people were suffering. Honor meant nothing if the species went extinct. After 3 months of blockade, with millions facing starvation and society beginning to break down, the Vrellian sovereignty requested terms for surrender. Ambassador Daewon returned to active service for the negotiations. He was 70 years old now, his hair completely white, his face showing the strain of the past year. He had stood before the Galactic Council and withdrawn Earth from membership. He had watched as his species went to war. Now he would deliver the terms that would end that war, and he would make sure those terms meant something. The negotiations took place on Meridian Point, the same neutral station where Commander Jiwoo had died. The Vrellians had requested a different location, but humanity refused. If peace was to be made, it would be made on the ground stained by Vrellian violence. The symbolism was intentional and brutal. Captain Sung-ho commanded the Marine detachment that secured the station. He was 37 years old and took his responsibility seriously. Every entrance was guarded. Every corridor was patrolled. Every person on the station was identified and tracked. Nothing would go wrong this time. No one would die under a flag of peace on his watch. The Vrellian delegation arrived in shame. Their ships were old cargo vessels, the only ones that still functioned after months of war. Their delegates wore simple clothes, not the elaborate ceremonial robes they had worn before. They looked tired, defeated, broken. High Minister Voth led them, the same official who had been present when Jiwoo died. He was older now, carrying the weight of his government's failure. Historian Mi Young presented humanity's demands. She was 63 years old and had spent her career studying galactic law and treaty structure. She had helped write every word of the document she now read, making sure it was clear, enforceable, and impossible to misinterpret. The demands shocked everyone present. The galaxy had expected humanity to claim Vrelian territory, demand resources, or impose crushing financial penalties. Instead, the terms focused on accountability, remembrance, and fundamental change. First Officer Krell, the Vrelian who had killed Commander Jiwoo, would be turned over to human custody. He would face trial under human law for murder during a diplomatic mission. The Vrelians had exiled him to a comfortable colony world, but humanity wanted justice, not convenience. Second, every Vrelian official who had failed to prevent the incident through poor security, hostile attitudes, or inadequate training would be removed from government service. The sovereignty's entire diplomatic and security structure would be rebuilt with human oversight. Third, the Vrelian government would pay reparations directly to Jiwoo's family, not to Earth. The amount was calculated not to enrich them but to acknowledge the value of the life that was taken. Money could not replace a mother, but it could show that her death meant something. Fourth, a monument to Commander Jiwoo would be erected in the capital city of Vrela Prime. The Vrelians would maintain it forever. Every generation would be required to visit it, to learn her story, to understand what happened when diplomatic protocols were violated. Fifth, the Vrelian military would be reduced to defensive forces only, enough to protect their worlds but not to threaten others. Human observers would verify compliance for 50 years, a generation of oversight to ensure the sovereignty learned its lesson. Sixth, every Vrelian child would be taught about the incident in mandatory education. The story of Commander Jiwoo, her murder, and the war that followed would become part of their cultural memory, a permanent reminder of the consequences of violence and disrespect. High Minister Voth listened to the terms in silence. When Mi-young finished reading, he closed his eyes and seemed to age another decade. These demands would fundamentally change Vrelian society. They would reshape how his people saw themselves and their place in the galaxy. But what choice did they have? Their military was destroyed. Their economy was collapsing. Their people were starving. "We accept," he said quietly. "All terms without modification." The trial of Officer Krell became the most watched event in galactic history. It was held on a neutral station with human judges, broadcast to every species in the council. Lieutenant Haewon, a 28-year-old communications officer, coordinated the broadcasts, making sure every world could watch as justice was delivered. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Prosecutor teams presented evidence that shocked even humans who thought they knew the full story. Historian Mi-young had obtained Krell's personal logs through Vrelian cooperation as part of the surrender terms. Those logs revealed the truth. Krell had not acted in panic or misunderstanding. He had harbored contempt for humans for years, considering them inferior and unworthy of equal treatment. He had seen the diplomatic mission as an opportunity to make a name by putting humans in their place. The hand gesture that supposedly triggered his response, the one the Vrelians claimed was an insult in their culture, was analyzed by cultural experts. They testified that the gesture was only an insult in ancient Vrelian history and had not been used as such for centuries. A trained diplomatic officer like Krell would have known this. He had manufactured an excuse to commit murder. The prosecution presented Commander Jiwoo's life in meticulous detail. Her service record showed 2 decades of successful diplomatic missions. Her personal communications revealed a woman who believed deeply in peace and worked tirelessly to maintain it. Video recordings showed her playing with her children, laughing at their jokes, helping them with homework. The galaxy saw not a statistic, but a person, a mother, a peacemaker who died trying to build a better future. Krell's defense argued for mercy based on his youth and claimed he acted from cultural misunderstanding. The judges listened patiently, then delivered their verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder during a diplomatic mission, a crime under both human and galactic law. The sentence, life imprisonment under human custody, with no possibility of parole. Krell would spend the rest of his life in a human prison, a living reminder that killing a diplomat had permanent consequences. The Vrelian officials who had enabled the incident through incompetence and hostile attitudes faced their own reckoning. They were stripped of all rank and position, barred from public service for life. Some tried to appeal, claiming they had not pulled the trigger. The human response was simple. You created an environment where such violence was possible. You failed in your duty to protect diplomatic missions. You share responsibility for the outcome. The signing ceremony for the peace treaty took place on Vrella Prime itself, in the shadow of the newly constructed monument. The monument was simple but powerful. A statue of Commander Jiwoo in her diplomatic uniform, hand extended in greeting, the pose she had been in moments before she died. The inscription was written in both human and Vrellian languages, 3 lines that said everything. She came in peace. Remember the cost of forgetting. Jiwoo's family attended the ceremony. Her oldest child, Junwoo, was 19 now, studying law like his mother had wanted. The twins, Mina and Hana, stood beside him, both wearing their mother's medals pinned to their clothes. They had spent the past year watching the galaxy learn about their mother, watching justice be delivered in her name. Junwoo spoke briefly at the ceremony, his voice steady despite his grief. My mother believed in peace, but not peace at any price. She believed in justice and accountability, in the idea that agreements mean something. You took her from us. Humanity took everything from you. Perhaps now both our peoples will remember what matters. The treaty was signed. The blockade was lifted. Human aid ships arrived at Vrella Prime within hours, carrying food and medical supplies to prevent starvation. The Vrellians accepted the aid with bitter humiliation, but they accepted it. They had learned that humanity could be as precise in mercy as they were in war. Counselor In-Soo, a 52-year-old civilian representative, monitored the reconstruction process. He made sure humanity's response served their principles, not just their rage. The war had been about justice, not revenge. Now the peace had to demonstrate that humanity meant what they said. They did not want to destroy the Vrellians. They wanted them to change, to become better, to never repeat their mistakes. Over the following months, Vrellian society began its transformation. The military was reduced to 30% of its former size, enough to defend their worlds but not to threaten others. Human observers verified every step, making sure no hidden forces remained. Shipyards were converted to civilian production. Weapons factories were dismantled or repurposed. The education reforms began. Vrellian children learned about Commander Jiwoo as part of their mandatory curriculum. They studied the incident, the war, the consequences of their government's actions. Some Vrellian teachers struggled with teaching their own people's failure, but the human observers were firm. This is part of the peace. This is how you make sure it never happens again. The monument in the capital became a pilgrimage site. Vrellian families visited it on school trips. Some left flowers, though humans found this gesture strange. Others simply stood in silence, reading the inscription, looking at the statue of a woman who had come to their world seeking peace and died for their government's arrogance. The galaxy watched all of this with a mixture of respect and fear. Humanity had demonstrated something unprecedented, the ability to wage war with overwhelming force while maintaining moral clarity about their goals. They had not become monsters in their anger. They had become something more dangerous, a species that would methodically dismantle any threat to their people while remaining true to their principles. The lesson was delivered. The account was settled. Commander Jiwoo's children had their justice. 7 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. The old Galactic Council, the one that had failed to protect Commander Jiwoo, was restructured completely. New enforcement mechanisms were created. Diplomatic protocols were strengthened. Species that had ignored the rules for centuries suddenly found themselves held accountable. The Council was no longer just a place where governments talked. It was a place where agreements had teeth and consequences were real. Human representatives returned to galactic politics, but the relationship was different now. No one dismissed humanity as cautious diplomats anymore. No one assumed they could be intimidated or ignored. Every species in the galaxy knew what happened when you violated human rights or killed their people. The memory of the war against the Vrellian sovereignty was still fresh, still raw, still terrifying. Junwoo, Commander Jiwoo's oldest child, followed in his mother's footsteps. He was 26 now, graduated from the Diplomatic Academy with honors and assigned to one of Earth's most important posts. He served as an ambassador to the Galactic Council, representing humanity in the same halls where his mother's death had been dismissed as an unfortunate incident. But he did not carry her gentle approach. He had inherited her dedication to peace but combined it with something harder, something the galaxy had taught him. Peace must be strong, or it means nothing. His first speech to the council was memorable. He stood before representatives from dozens of species and spoke with quiet intensity. My mother died on a diplomatic mission because someone thought killing a human was acceptable. Humanity spent the next year teaching the galaxy why that thought was wrong. We did not do this out of cruelty. We did it out of necessity. Peace without consequences is just waiting for the next tragedy. The representatives listened in uncomfortable silence. Some species had been allies during the war, quietly supporting humanity's actions. Others had tried to stay neutral. A few had criticized human methods as excessive, but all of them understood the message. Humanity was back and they would not tolerate disrespect again. Admiral Sunmi retired from military service at 62. She spent her remaining years writing a memoir about the war, a detailed account that became required reading in military academies across human space. Her book was titled The Weight of Peace and examined how the desire for peace at any cost had nearly made humanity vulnerable to any species willing to use violence. We spent 700 years proving we were civilized. She wrote in the introduction, "We forgot that being civilized does not mean being weak. Real civilization requires the strength to defend your values, the courage to stand up to aggression, and the wisdom to know when patience becomes foolishness." Commander Jiwoo's death taught us that lesson. We will never forget it again. Minister Hyojin remained in office overseeing humanity's transition back to peacetime. She was 65 now and tired, but she could not retire yet. There was too much work to be done, too many reforms to implement. The war had revealed weaknesses in Earth's systems, gaps in their preparedness, areas where they had become too comfortable. She made sure those gaps were closed. In an interview with a galactic news service, she was asked if humanity had changed. Her answer was careful and precise. "We have always been capable of great violence. That is not new. What is different is the galaxy now knows it. For 700 years we tried to be the peaceful species, the reasonable ones who always compromised. We still prefer that. But we learned we cannot be so desperate for peace that we accept injustice. Some things are worth fighting for." Captain Hyun commanded the Commander Jiwoo Memorial Station, a diplomatic and defense platform built at the edge of human space. The station served dual purposes. It was a place where aliens could meet with human representatives, and it was a military base equipped with enough firepower to destroy a fleet. The symbolism was intentional. Come in peace and you will be welcomed. Come in violence and you will be obliterated. He was 45 now, older and quieter than the young officer who had served under Jiwoo. He kept her photo on his desk, the official portrait showing her in full uniform, smiling gently at the camera. Sometimes younger officers asked about her, curious about the woman whose death had changed everything. Hyun always told them the same thing. She was patient, kind, and dedicated to peace. She deserved better than she got. We made sure she got justice instead. On the observation deck of the station, Hyun watched ships pass through the checkpoint. Human vessels, alien traders, diplomatic shuttles, all following the new protocols. These protocols were stricter than before, with multiple security checks and careful verification of everyone aboard. No one complained. Everyone remembered what happened when security was lax. Ensign Soo-jin, a 22-year-old officer fresh from the academy, approached him with a datapad. "Sir, we just received word that another species has requested a formal alliance with Earth, the Kelthani Federation. They specifically cited our conduct during the Vrelian War as their reason for wanting to ally with us." Hyun took the datapad and reviewed the request. The Kelthani were a small species, only a dozen worlds, but they were known for their honesty and their advanced medical technology. They had remained neutral during the war, but they had clearly been paying attention. "Make sure they understand what that alliance means," Hyun said. "We honor our commitments. We protect our allies. We expect the same in return. And we have very long memories." "Yes, sir," Soo-jin replied. "Should I mention Commander Jiwoo in the response?" Hyun touched the small memorial pin on his uniform. Every human officer wore one now, a simple design showing Jiwoo's service number and the date of her death. It was a reminder of why they served, why they trained, why they maintained their vigilance even during peace. Always mention her. That is how we make sure this never happens again. The Vrelian recovery was slow and painful. Their society had been fundamentally altered by defeat and occupation. The human observers remained for the full 50 years mandated by the treaty, making sure the sovereignty kept its promises. Most Vrelians resented this, but a growing number, especially younger ones, understood it was necessary. Vrelian delegate Kesh represented his people in the new Galactic Council. He was young, barely 30, part of the generation that grew up learning about Commander Jiwoo in school. He worked closely with human representatives, building relationships that his parents' generation would have found impossible. The work was awkward and sometimes painful, but it was progress. In one conversation with Ambassador Junwoo, Kesh spoke candidly about his people's struggle. We are taught to hate what happened, to be ashamed of our government's actions. But we are also taught that this shame is necessary, that it protects us from repeating our mistakes. It is strange carrying the guilt for something we did not personally do. Junwoo understood better than most. I carry my mother's legacy every day. I did not ask for it, but it shapes everything I do. Your generation did not kill my mother, but you carry the responsibility of making sure your government never does something like that again. It is not fair, but it is necessary. The monument on Vrela Prime remained the most visited site on the planet. Maintenance crews tended it daily, making sure it stayed perfect. Fresh flowers appeared regularly, left by Vrelians who wanted to express remorse. Some humans found this touching, others found it insufficient, but everyone agreed it served its purpose. No Vrelian would forget what happened when they killed a human diplomat. On the 7th anniversary of Commander Jiwoo's death, her family returned to Vrela Prime for a memorial service. Junwoo was now an experienced ambassador. The twins, Minna and Hana, were 22, both serving in Earth's diplomatic corps like their mother. They stood before the monument, reading the inscription they had seen so many times before. Thousands of Vrelians attended the service, standing in respectful silence. Some were young, there because their schools required it. Others were older, carrying the personal shame of having been alive when their government committed such an act. A few were very old, veterans of the war who had seen what humanity could do when pushed too far. Minna spoke briefly. Our mother would have wanted peace, but she would have demanded justice first. You gave her justice, though it cost you everything. Perhaps that is how real peace is built. Not through forgetting, but through remembering. The galaxy had indeed learned to remember. Military academies across dozens of species now taught the Vrelian War as a case study in what not to do. The lessons were clear. Do not underestimate humans. Do not violate diplomatic protocols. Do not assume peaceful species will remain peaceful when attacked. And never believe that killing one person will be overlooked. Human military doctrine evolved based on the war's lessons. The new approach was called peace through demonstrated capability. Humanity would maintain overwhelming military force, train constantly, and develop weapons that stayed ahead of potential enemies. But they would use that force only when necessary, only when all other options failed, and only with clear objectives that served justice rather than conquest. Trade relationships gradually returned to normal, though trust took longer to rebuild. Species that had remained neutral or supported humanity during the war found themselves with favorable trade agreements and defensive pacts. Species that had criticized human methods or supported the Vrelians found themselves politely excluded from certain opportunities. Humanity did not forget who had stood with them and who had not. The Galactic Council's new charter included stronger protections for diplomatic missions. Any attack on diplomats, regardless of the attacker's reasons or excuses, would be met with immediate council intervention and severe penalties. The rule was nicknamed Jiwoo's Law, though officially it had a more formal title. Every species understood what it meant. Diplomatic immunity was absolute and inviolable. Captain Hyun stood on his station's observation deck, watching the peaceful flow of traffic through human space. Ships moved on established routes, following procedures, respecting boundaries. It looked so normal, so calm, but he knew what lurked beneath that calm surface. Humanity had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to for now. A young officer approached him, interrupting his thoughts. "Sir, incoming message from Earth Command. They are requesting your input on the new defense station designs. They want to know if current capabilities are sufficient or if we need stronger deterrents. Hyun considered the question carefully. 7 years of peace had been good for everyone. But peace required maintenance, required strength, required constant vigilance. Tell them current capabilities are sufficient but should be upgraded every 5 years. We must always be prepared. That is the price of real peace. He looked out at the stars one more time, thinking about his old commander, the woman who had believed so deeply in peace that she dedicated her life to it. She had died for that belief, killed by someone who thought humans were weak and could be intimidated. But her death had taught the galaxy a lesson they would never forget. Peace was not weakness. Peace was a choice made by those strong enough to choose it. And when peace was broken by those who mistook strength for softness, the consequences would be absolute, inevitable, and unforgettable. Commander Jiwoo's legacy lived on, not just in monuments and history lessons, but in every diplomatic mission that succeeded, every treaty that held, every time an alien looked at a human and remembered that killing one of them meant facing all of them. She had wanted peace. Humanity had given her justice, and from that justice a new and stronger peace had emerged. The 700-year-old treaty was gone, replaced by something better, something earned through sacrifice, built through strength, and maintained through the clear understanding that humanity would never again tolerate disrespect for their people. The galaxy had learned, humanity had taught them, and everyone, both human and alien, hoped the lesson would never need to be repeated.